Hello again and welcome back to AMOS, our course on Agile software development. Now, we just talked about, in the last section, we talked about how the overall process for the project runtime, the semester looks like. Now I want to talk about the team meeting, a weekly meeting, once a sprint meeting in which you get your work done, an important part of your work done. So here you can see the conceptualization of the sprint again. You will notice that a sprint, the time box in which you perform work, starts with sprint planning, starts with a meeting and ends with meetings. In addition to the main work streams of product management, software development and process improvement going on all the time. So at a university now, where it's hard to get everyone into the same room, you have all these different courses and you have just a lot to do. In order to make this work at a university, we merge these logically separate meetings into one meeting, the team meeting. And the team meeting starts actually with ending the last sprint. So it starts with the sprint review, release and retrospective, to be explained in a few seconds. And then in the middle of the team meeting, you may want to take a pause, but in the middle of the team meeting, then there's a switch over, a change from the old sprint to the new sprint. And now the first thing you do in the new sprint is sprint planning, to plan the work that you want to do in this new, just started sprint. This way, you have to meet only once in person or online, but you have to be there all at the same time, only once in a given sprint rather than at two separate times. And we have allocated this time slot for all of you. It is mandatory that you are there. If you miss the team meetings, you can't pass the course eventually. Logically, again, the team meeting is split in the middle, but it's one meeting after all. So, before you go into the team meeting, you need to prepare it. There are two jobs to do it well. I'm explaining the team meeting now. It's a critical part of making AMOS successful. There are two different things to prepare. The release manager needs to make sure that going into the team meeting, there is a demoable software, that the software builds, compiles, builds, tests, and can be shown within the team meeting among the team members. For that, the release manager, usually the night or the day before the team meeting, makes sure that all commits are in that are supposed to be in, make sure the software builds. If something fails, they will have to prod the respective developers or kick their commits from the demoable version. And now that they have identified which version of the software is demoable, can be used for show and tell in a review session, they tag it as a release candidate using the format you see here on the screen. So the release manager cuts the release candidate before the team meeting, and tags it, and that's exactly the software version you used to demo in the team meeting. Not yet an additional commit. If someone comes too late, bad luck. You should not accept their code into the release unless you're willing to make sure it builds, tests, and can be used for demoing. That's up to the release manager, but I want to see the release candidate before the meeting. Next to the release manager, the product owner, the person responsible for features, requirements, makes sure that the product backlog is in good order, meaning there are enough new features described that will keep the team busy at least for the upcoming sprint. Usually there should be much more. And that these feature descriptions are of high quality so that you can actually discuss them in the team meeting. So the product owner makes sure that in the product backlog there are enough new features, possibly also bug reports to fix, may also include refactorings, but always of sufficient quality if there's a chance that they will actually be picked up for work of sufficient quality that they can be turned into a software. And the product owner does that before the team meeting, in a meeting usually called the sprint preparation meeting. With that, we are ready to start the team meeting. The team meeting starts with a sprint review. In a sprint review, ideally, I know it's not always possible, but ideally the release manager shows to everyone. It's always show and tell. Show me. Don't talk about it. Show me. It's always ideally show and tell. And ideally the release manager can check out and build in front of everyone's eyes the software so that everyone sees this builds nicely. Also, since release manager as a role may change between people, different people may get to do it, which is great, because then you will know as a release manager whether the software builds on your machine, which in turn only will be the case if you really have agreed on the proper working environment and ideally fully encoded it in the build scripts in the build environment so that you don't run into a works on my machine but not on yours, but rather can consistently and independently of context build the software. I understand that some software takes a long time to build, and sometimes there are execution operating situations like devices you have to use that it's sometimes not possible. But if you can, that is a top performance to show how the software builds in front of everyone's eyes. The release manager makes the software available. They don't necessarily have to demo the software. Ideally, everyone else can also do that. Online, of course, that is a little bit of a problem as you can't push over the laptop to a person to demo the software. Now, however, in the review, the product owner guides, that's how we do it, guides the review of what is in the sprint backlog in the supposedly done, so in the for review section, because that's what the developers say, we finished this and we want it to be reviewed. So the product owner picks the top item and says, please demo. Usually the original developer will demo, and a good product owner will then ask probing questions. Can you do this? Can you do that? And will basically, as a human tester, through the developer or by themselves, will test the feature, whether it does what they said it should do and believe they agreed upon with the developers during the planning session a week ago. If everything seems fine, you check. So part of that is checking the acceptance criteria. If everything seems fine, you also check whether the definition of done is fulfilled. And if all of this looks good, you can conclude, the product owner can conclude that the feature under review was properly implemented, has been done. And if so, you can move the feature into the feature archive where the stuff goes that has been finished. If it was not fully done, and fully done means 100%, so if it was only done, if only 99%, if it's not done, it's not done. If it was not finished, then you move the feature back to the product backlog to be possibly picked up in the next planning iteration, in the next planning session. The software developer here interacts with the product owner. There's variation of how you do it, but we usually let the product owner do the review and the software developers demo their features they implemented, and they answer. The developers answer to the product owner, to the person in the product owner role, as to what they ask about the features. Once they agree it's done, or once the product owner agrees that it's done, the developers tell the product owner what they think the real size of the feature was, as opposed to what they estimated during planning. And the product owner takes notice of that and will use it for some data computation. So this is the review of one feature. Product owner picks a feature, developer demos it, they discuss it, review concludes it's done, and then the product owner moves on to the next feature. Don't do all features at once. Don't gloss over things. It's the responsibility of the product owner to look at the features one by one, ask probing questions to make sure that the feature actually, the implementation actually does what is expected of it. You can see here how things move through the project board on GitHub, a Kanban board. Awaiting review, here is the column that the product owner takes the features for review of and asks developers to demo them. There they get the real size in addition to the estimated size, so we use tags here, and if it was done, it's moved into the feature archive. If it was not done, it's moved back to the product backlog, which means that it will go through another planning cycle. Once the column of in review to review has been cleared, there's nothing left to review. And the question is the software with those features releasable? So can we cut a sprint release? And the product owner, based on what they just learned about how many features were done and how well they are done, and does the system keep crashing or not, the test suite's good enough, etc. They then look at the definition of done for the sprint release. You won't have that in the beginning. We will do definition of done for sprint releases, quality criteria that you need to pass later on. But later on, you will use, like for individual features, you will use a definition of done in which you say these criteria have to be fulfilled, and then we can decide to release the software. That means the release manager will tag the software with a new tag called sprint 3 or 4, whatever, release. So don't just change the candidate tag, leave the candidate tag intact and just add a new release tag, because there might have been small fixes between the candidate and the release, and you want to catch that and want to have that documented if necessary. If you don't have to, but if you maintain a change log, take note of what changed in the releases. After release, it's not quite time to celebrate finishing the sprint yet. You do a sprint retrospective. Here, the Scrum Master, it's the Scrum Master's role. What they will do is the Scrum Master of the current outgoing sprint, they will report on whether they were able to solve some of these so-called impediments that are process problems that the team might have. Such process problems could be that the industry partner is not answering, or that you are not getting can't agree on who product owner could be, etc. So it's only process problems, and the Scrum Master reports on it. In some situations, you may have changes between Scrum Master, though it's usually better, and with coaches who play Scrum Masters, they are the same person. But sometimes you have a new Scrum Master coming in, and the new Scrum Master then will take over from the old one who just reported about the old impediments. The new Scrum Master will ask about new impediments. They basically make a roll call, go around the circle virtually or physically, ask the people in the team what are current problems, and takes note of them. It's completely all right to say you have no problem. In fact, it's preferred if there are no problems, so you just say pass or on to the next person. But if there's a serious problem to mention, you, the developer, product owner, should do so. Please make sure that the problems you talk about are process problems. The Scrum Master should usually reject technical problems as impediments, because that's for the developers to solve. They care about process improvement, what's keeping the team what's holding the team back of functioning at top performance. So they will look at process issues. And they take note of that in the impediments backlog and the planning documents. And finally, you will answer the happiness index, which has also been called the emotion seismograph. That's this little tool that we provide you with, where you register your happiness about the project in general with a value between -3, very unhappy, and +3, very happy, 0, neutral. And you do this anonymously, but everyone can see the overall team's happiness by individual items. You kind of average it out perhaps over the course of the project. You see the x-axis is the timeline by sprint. So you answer the happiness index once at the end of a sprint, and you can see how things are changing with respect to happiness. Almost every project will have a down once where they are not so happy because something went wrong and you didn't cut the release properly, or there's a really hard problem and you have to rework. So there will be times of unhappiness, but usually you recover. Only if things are persistently down, might we come and talk to you. So we actually look at this. For us, meaning the teachers, it's an indicator whether a project is doing all right or not. And if there's a persistent problem with happiness, there may be something that we have to help you with. Well, it's not grade relevant. It's simply, for us, we want you to be successful and have a fun experience. So we're kind of watching how you're doing and whether there's a need for us to help you. And now you can celebrate, if you will, or just go for a small pause because you finished the outgoing, the now old sprint. And up next is the new sprint. So you switch gears. You're now in the new sprint. There's a product owner, maybe even a new product owner, if it's a different one from the previous sprint, old product owner. And you now have to plan what you want to do in the upcoming week, in the upcoming sprint. The new product owner, or this new sprint's product owner, they go to the product backlog. And if there were rejected during review items, the product owner may have to reprioritize them. Meaning there were items, there were backlog entries that have not been finished, even though the developer thought they were. And they may now be not so important. Usually they are just at the top of it and people want to finish it, so they're usually of highest priority. But sometimes you realize that's a complete dead end, we should stop working on it, and then they get deprioritized. So the product owner looks at what the review has put back into the product backlog and prioritizes it. So that, after a short exercise, the product owner now looks again at a product backlog where by priority they can see the features that they want the development team to implement it. What they do here is they take the top feature, ask the team, can you implement it? Do you want to implement it? Yes, no. And then if the team says we can do that, it is moved into the to-do column for pickup, for planning, for pickup through the development team. This way you fill the to-do column until the development team says they don't want more work for the upcoming sprint. This decision by the developers, can we do this? Can we do one more feature? Can we do one more feature? Can we do one more feature? Is its own small process. And for that, we need to look at how developers as a team try to understand the complexity of a feature, try to estimate its size or the effort needed, which is the input for them to then say, yep, we can take one more feature, two more features, but that's that then. So this is the so-called planning poker, using a metric or a measure of size or effort called user story points. So story points are, again, a way of how you measure the size of some feature in the product backlog or in any backlog, really. And it's a completely arbitrary measure in that it's just points. It has no unit, and it doesn't really relate, or it should not relate to real time. At least, no, it does not express real time. It expresses the complexity and size of the feature that is to be programmed. So the key is it is independent of a particular person. That's why it's not duration. A good developer will do it faster than a poor developer. We want this estimate of the size in form of story points to be independent of a person, a particular person. So that's why it's just these numbers, which effectively are really just categories. So there's no point in fine-tuning it. You really just want ultimately to say, is it small, is it medium, is it large? Is it extra large, or is it trivial? And the key challenge for here is to get started. Once you have a couple of times estimated a feature to be of a certain size, the only thing you need to do in the future is for same or similar size features to land in the same category. It does not have to relate to a particular amount of time. The key is if something is a medium-sized feature, all future medium-sized features should also be a 3. So that's why using story points and the planning poker process for it is really a consensus building process that ideally you carry out consistently over time, and it doesn't matter how many points it actually is. One team calibrates on one size, uses story points for a medium-sized feature, and others on a higher or lower. It doesn't actually matter as long as you're consistent, because the goal is that you learn over time. We can do in some 25 story points, and it's specific to the team. A different team which does the same amount of work might call it a 33 story points. It doesn't matter. The story point number doesn't matter. So feature by feature, the product owner takes the top feature, reads it to the developers, explains it to the developers. The developers may have to ask questions, may want to ask questions, and then they decide, okay, we want to estimate now the size. And if it was a physical meeting, they would hold this classic card deck with numbers, and then they all would think, oh, it's a 3 or a 5 by themselves, and then upon command lay it on the table. So a key of this so-called Delphi expert method is that you don't see what the others are doing and calibrate or adjust to that. You think by yourself, and you all play the cards at once, so that there's no influencing each other and the cards are on the table. If you happen to agree right away, great. It's a 3 because everyone says it's a 3. More likely, certainly in the first round, there'll be multiple rounds. In the first round, there's some disagreement. Some say it's a 3, some say it's a 5, some say it's even an 8. Then you need to discuss it. Why do you come to different estimations? In the beginning, where you haven't even calibrated yet, you'll most certainly come to different estimations. All you need to do is talk about the reasons why you feel this is larger or smaller. So the developers will now bring their technical arguments why this is a large feature. It's an 8 because I have to change the database layout and I have to write update code, schema evolution code, and so forth and so forth. So you make technical arguments that try to explain to the others why you think it's large or why you think it's small, why it's so trivial to do that. This discussion of the disagreements of the size estimates, you usually start at the extremes. So if there's a 3 and a 5 and an 8, you don't start with the 5s, you start with the 3 and the 8. And so everyone simply says why they think why the outliers think that's what it is, large or small. And everyone thinks by themselves, and you play another round. So you pick up the cards again and play another round. and most likely after 1 or 2 rounds you already converge on a common answer. So it sounds more complicated, I guess, than it really is. You will converge quickly and you will eventually agree it's a 5. And the key thing is you now learned by discussing technical complexity, what is a 5? For your team only, what's a 5? And so in the future, same size features will also be 5s rather than 3s or 8s. And so you do this for one feature, you agree on the size, and then you move on to the next feature. And the product owner asks again, can you do one more feature? Asks, can you do one more feature? And the team says, looks like we still have space. In the beginning, it's just guts feeling. Later on, it is, yeah, we usually do 25 story points, we're only at 15, so probably we have more space. And so forth, until the developers say, no, that's enough, that's our fill for the coming sprint, and we close this now. It is the development team decision how much work they want to do. I'm only expecting of student teams that they do the work required by the credit points you get for the software. Nobody, not even the industry partner, not a product owner, can push the development team to do more than what is expected by credit points. So it is the time you put in and not results actually in this case. And once you have agreed on all the features that are moved now from product backlog to the to-do column, you're done with the meeting and you can close it. There's afterwork. This product owner has to do some cleanup, usually in the planning documents and the project board and the Kanban board, etc. The software developers actually still have to assign the features to people. That's really a two-step. One is who gets to do it, and sometimes what is a feature from a product owner's perspective is actually multiple tasks from a developer's perspective. So Scrum in the real world with longer sprints than 1 week often makes a distinction between the feature that a user can understand and how it is broken down into multiple programming tasks that the developers understand. The product owner does not have to define the programming tasks. The developers do that after the team meeting. For the AMOS project, with 1 week sprints and product owners who are also computer science or information systems or technically competent people, very often a feature in the product backlog is just one task. So if you can cut your features small enough and they speak to developers and customers alike, then there's no need to break down features into tasks in this case. Developers say they want to do that. You're free to pair program, and that's it. The Scrum Master has their own work cut out in the process improvement work stream, as do the product owners in the product management work stream and the software developers in the software development work stream, until they meet again in the next team meeting 1 week later. That's it for me for the team meeting, the core meeting not to miss in the AMOS project. And with that, thank you very much for your time and attention, and see you in class.